Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. Thiago closed the book in his hand, his brow furrowing involuntarily. These days, he often thinks about his college days. At the time, Marisol was the brightest girl in Arizona State University's business school, always surrounded by a crowd of admirers. They met in an advanced accounting class, and Marisol volunteered to sit next to him that day. "I've noticed you always offer great insights in your financial analysis classes," she said with a smile. After class that day, she invited him to join her for coffee, and that started their story. Shortly after graduation, the two entered into marriage. Looking at the time displayed on his smartwatch, 8:17 p.m., Thiago sighed. For the third time this week, his wife Marisol was late from work. In the 12 years they had been married, until the last few months, she had never been like this. Upon graduation, Thiago landed a well-paying job at a small local telecommunications company. Marisol, on the other hand, joined an international telecommunications company, albeit in a lower position at first. The two thoughtfully developed a detailed life plan. Focusing on her career until she is 30, she will not have children for the time being. When Marisol finishes her MBA, she will support Thiago to continue her education. And finally, when both of their careers have stabilized, they will start a full-fledged family. "We are responsible for our future children," said Marisol at the time. "And it would be irresponsible to have children without a full financial foundation and career security." The decision was agreed upon by both men. Marisol did do what she said she would do, completing her MBA in just 4 years, and then quickly rising to assistant vice president, with a salary far exceeding Thiago's. But when it was Marisol's turn to support him in furthering his education, his attitude changed subtly. The agreement to have children has also been repeatedly postponed, and she always avoids the subject on the grounds that she is under too much pressure at work. At first, Thiago didn't think much of it when Marisol called to say she'd be home late. As an executive, occasional overtime is inevitable. But as this became more frequent, small but significant changes began to catch his attention. The turning point came 6 months ago. The company has brought in a new vice president, Bastion, from its headquarters in the Netherlands. Bastion is tall and distinguished and comes from the Amsterdam headquarters. For the first 2 weeks, Marisol was always excited to talk about this new colleague. "Bastion is really insightful," Marisol said with glowing eyes at dinner one day. "And his understanding of the international market is impressive. And you know what? He speaks 3 languages." Thiago noticed that his wife looked different than usual when she talked about Bastion. She would unconsciously fix her hair and speak a little faster than usual. What concerned him even more was that Marisol began to pay special attention to dressing up, even acquiring some new professional clothes. However, 2 weeks later, things suddenly changed. Marisol's talk of Bastion ends abruptly, as if the man never existed. This perverse turn of events raises Thiago's alarm. "How's that new Dutch co-worker doing these days?" he asked tentatively at dinner one day. "He works in another department. We don't see each other much," Marisol replied, an unnatural blush flashing across her face. As 2 executives on the same office floor, this explanation is clearly untenable. Thiago began to watch his wife's every move and noticed that her cell phone habits had become different. She started looking at her cell phone with her back to him a lot, and sometimes went out on the balcony to answer calls. It was a normal Thursday night when Marisol came home and Thiago noticed that her lipstick was smudging a bit. This is extremely counterintuitive for a woman who is nearly obsessive-compulsive about her grooming. As she leaned in to kiss him, as she always did, he caught a whiff of an unfamiliar perfume. It wasn't the scent of white linen, the usual perfume he'd given her. When he went to bed that night, Thiago deliberately put his arms around his wife from behind and pressed his face against her neck. He didn't know much about perfume, but he was pretty sure that the scent lingering on the tip of his nose at the moment was worlds away from white linen. Rumors in the office quickly reached Thiago's ears. A friend of his who works at Marisol's company politely told him that Marisol and Bastion had been seen having lunch together a lot lately. Not only that, they are often the last 2 people to leave the office. On a weekend morning, while Thiago was organizing his closet, he overheard a newly purchased silk shirt with the hang tag still intact. The style of this dress is completely different from what Marisol usually wears, and it runs significantly large. "It's something to wear for a company event," Marisol explained lightly when he asked, her eyes flickering to avoid his gaze. To add to Thiago's heartache, Marisol seems to have completely forgotten about their agreement. Whenever he brings up plans to continue his education or have children, she always brings up all sorts of excuses. It's more important to buy a house now, she would say. It's not too late for you to go to school when we have our own house. As for the kids, how can you possibly take care of them when you're so busy working now? As time goes on, Marisol grows colder and colder to family life. She no longer cares about Thiago's work or life as much as she once did, and even their intimate moments become perfunctory and hurried. What disturbed him even more was that she began to change her attitude towards money. As the main source of income for the family, she has become increasingly assertive in her financial decisions. I'll just decide these things, she often says. After all, I'm the main source of income. This condescending attitude makes Thiago both angry and heartbroken. Once upon a time, Marisol was the girl willing to work for a common future. They shared the same ideals and plans. Now, however, it was as if she had become a different person. Success in the workplace seems to have made her forget her initial commitment, and the Marisol who was looking forward to starting a full family with Thiago seems to have disappeared. Late at night, Thiago often tosses and turns. After 12 years of marriage, they should have already had their own children instead of losing themselves in the whirlwind of career and desire. It became clear to him that their marriage was going through a crisis like no other. At the moment, when the sound of the garage door sounded again, Thiago dropped the book in his hands and took a deep breath. He knew that a storm was coming that would be enough to change the fate of both men. There was a suffocating sense of oppression in the air, like the calm before a storm. He looked out the window at the darkening sky and already had a certain premonition in his mind that their marriage might be about to face its toughest test yet. The garage door slams and Thiago sits quietly in his living room, waiting for the upcoming confrontation. He heard the sound of Marisol's heels on the floor and the subtle clatter of her putting her bag away. "I'm back," Marisol's voice came from the foyer. She stood in front of the mirror and straightened her makeup, as was her daily habit after work. Today, she spent an unusually long time in front of the mirror, as if preparing for an upcoming conversation. Thiago noticed that her makeup was more elaborate today than usual, and she was wearing more perfume than usual. All these details remind him that his wife is preparing for a special moment. Marisol changes out of her professional attire and makes a point of wearing the nightgown Thiago gave her last year. This flattering silk nightgown was one of her favorite birthday gifts. She took one last look in the mirror, took a deep breath, and walked to the living room. "Can we talk?" She stood in front of Thiago, her fingers unconsciously twisted together. There was both nervousness and a hint of anticipation in his voice. In fact, Marisol had mentally rehearsed this conversation countless times. For the past 2 weeks, she and Bastion had been cautiously planning the weekend. They agreed to meet at an upscale hotel on the outskirts of town, and Bastion had made all the arrangements. "I'd like to make a request of you," Marisol said, taking a deep breath. "I need a free weekend." "What do you mean?" Thiago asked calmly, even though his heart had begun to race. He noticed his wife's eyes drifted unconsciously out the window as she said this. She paused, as if searching for the right words, and, "There are some things that need to be worked out between Bastion and me. Just this once, just for a weekend. I love you, Thiago, not him. And when this weekend is over, I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." The air in the room seemed to freeze. Thiago felt a twinge in his stomach, knowing that by simply making the request, Marisol had ended their marriage. However, he remained rational and decided to let the conversation continue. "What if after this weekend you realize that once isn't enough?" he asked in a hushed voice. "What if you realize you need him more than you need me?" "It won't be, I promise," Marisol replied quickly, an almost naive certainty passing over her face. "It's just an attempt. I promised you 12 years ago that you were my only choice." "Exactly," Thiago's voice turned cold. "A promise you made 12 years ago is now going to be put on hold for another man. Do you think such a promise has any meaning at all?" Marisol's face flushes and her eyes begin to avert. "I need this. Thiago, I know you love me enough to understand. Just like you've always understood me putting off having kids and understanding me focusing on my career. No, Marisol, you don't need this. You just want it. Thiago stood up and looked her straight in the eye and, I don't own you. You're free. If you insist, I can't stop you. But remember, every choice has its price. So that means you agree? Marisol's eyes lit up, apparently not hearing the warning in her husband's words. No, I'm telling you to do what you think you have to do, and then I'll do what I have to do. Whatever, she said contemptuously, turning to go upstairs. Marisol returned to her bedroom and immediately messaged Bastion. For the past 2 weeks, they've planned this weekend out in great detail. Bastion booked the best hotel on the outskirts of town, and they agreed to meet on Friday night and would be together all weekend. They even planned out a couple of restaurants they wanted to go to, and Bastion had made reservations. Early the next morning, Thiago started working on divorce-related matters. He first contacted his bank and began preparing the paperwork to split the account. Although Marisol has been the main source of income for the family, for many years their income was deposited into a joint account. He carefully organized all of his financial records for the past several years, including mortgage payments, investment accounts, and credit card bills. He also contacted several reputable divorce attorneys to schedule a consultation for the following week. At the same time, he began to systematically collect evidence: text message logs, email exchanges, credit card spending details over the past few months, and even office surveillance logs of Marisol's overtime work, all of which he obtained through special channels. When he returned home in the evening, he saw a delicate little suitcase sitting by the door. Apparently, Marisol has meticulously prepared everything needed for the weekend. She was sitting at the table drinking coffee with a smug smile on her face. Seems like you have a lot of confidence in yourself, Thiago said, setting down his keys and wallet. He noticed a small bag full of cosmetics sitting next to the suitcase that he had given her for Christmas last year. I have great faith in my good husband, she said in a sweet, cloying tone, and I know you will understand. Now kiss me goodbye and wish me a good weekend and don't sulk, she said, standing up and striking a pouty pose. Thiago looked at her and gave her the saddest smile and shook his head. God, I used to love you so much, he whispered, turning and walking up the stairs. Marisol didn't seem to notice that he used the past tense. She left the house with her mind drifting miles away where Bastion was waiting for her. She felt like a 16-year-old girl about to go to the first prom of her life. On Saturday morning, Thiago received an unexpected phone call. It was his friend from Marisol, who worked in the Human Resources Department, who told him that Bastion and Marisol had taken a room in a luxury hotel on the outskirts of the city under the name Mr. and Mrs. Wigman. As an employee of the Human Resources Department, he had to keep an eye on the behavior of the executives because it could affect the company's reputation. I'm sorry, man, his friend said, but I think you have a right to know this. I can provide more details if you need them. After hanging up the phone, Thiago went into the bedroom and began to put Marisol's clothes into a garbage bag. His movements were slow and meticulous, as if he were performing a ritual. Each piece of clothing carries their memories, and now those memories have become bitter. He took special care to keep her jewelry and valuables in a separate box. Despite the anger and pain, he remained rational and decent. It's not revenge, but a necessary closure. In the process of organizing, he found more heartbreaking evidence. New underwear hidden deep in a drawer with tags still attached. An email confirmation of a reservation at an upscale restaurant. Several photos with Bastion at company events. These will be used as evidence in the divorce proceedings. When everything is packed, Thiago arranges them neatly near the front door. Then he sat down, turned on the TV, and played his favorite movie. He knew that when Marisol returned, she would find her world turned upside down. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision, but a well-thought-out choice. Just as Marisol chose her weekend of freedom, he chose his own path. The difference is that his choice meant a permanent goodbye. By Sunday afternoon, he had completed most of his preparations. Bank accounts have been divided, important documents have been copied and saved, and attorneys have been selected. He even started looking for a new place to live because he knew that this house full of memories he could no longer live in. As night falls, Thiago sits in his living room, the glow of the television set bouncing off his face. He remembered their vows, those promises of a future, the child they were supposed to have. All of that was undone by a weekend try. Thiago's expression grew determined as he heard the garage door open again. He knew that the next scene could be ugly, but he was ready for it. It wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was his defense of his dignity. It was completely dark, but for him, it was the beginning of a new life. The garage door slowly opens and Marisol walks into the home with a look of weariness and loss on her face instead of the expected joy. The weekend had been far less of an experience than she had imagined. Bastion reveals a side of him at the upscale hotel that he's never shown at the office. Bossy, selfish, and even a little rude. What about all that elegance underneath the suits? Where's all that demeanor? She mentally kept asking herself. Friday night's dinner was quite pleasant, but when they got back to their hotel room, Bastion acted like an impatient teenager, with none of the maturity he usually displays at the office. To her further dismay, even by Saturday, the situation had not improved. "I'm back," she cried, trying to hide her inner loss with a brisk tone. She stood in the foyer, waiting for her husband to come out, but the only sound in the house was the television coming from the home theater. Her face turned instantly pale when she saw the duffel bags and boxes neatly arranged by the door. "What does that mean?" Her voice began to shake. Thiago stepped out of the home theater and looked at her with a calm expression. "Makes it easier for you to move out when I send you the divorce papers." "No, there's not going to be a divorce," Marisol said eagerly. "We've already talked about it. It's just one weekend. One weekend? We've been married for 12 years. You can't divorce me because of this one weekend." At the moment, how she wished she had never made that stupid request. "First of all, we didn't talk," Thiago corrected calmly. "You talked and I listened. You told me you wanted free time. When it was my turn to talk, I told you there would be consequences, but you chose to ignore them." Marisol began to look through the bags, and when she saw that all of her clothes were packed, she sucked in a cold breath. "Damn, that's not funny, Thiago. What do you think you're doing?" "The fact that we're married means there will never be any free time," Thiago continued, determination in his voice. "And I would never consider being unfaithful to you. But apparently you have a different understanding." Tears began to flow from Marisol's eyes. For perhaps the first time in their marriage, Thiago didn't come forward to comfort her. "Things have gotten worse," she drawled. Thiago noted, "Once upon a time I used to comfort you when you cried, but now I see clearly that you're just trying to manipulate my feelings with your tears." "I know you still love me, Thiago. Why can't we start over?" Marisol tries to get closer to him. "I do still love you, which is why this hurts." Thiago steps back. "But I can see that you love me far less than I love you. More importantly, I can never trust you again." Early the next morning, Thiago started working on the divorce. He made an appointment a week in advance with one of the best divorce lawyers in town, Attorney Garcia. During the time he waited to meet, he began to systematically collect and organize evidence. Through their joint bank account records, Thiago detailed all of Marisol's recent suspicious expenditures, bills from high-end restaurants, luxury purchases that coincided with her working overtime. He also found news reports and internal company communications related to Bastion's transfer from the company's public information sources. His friend, as a compliance officer in the Human Resources Department, had a responsibility to watch for and document executive misconduct. "These are official personnel records," his friend explained, "and I can testify as a witness if needed. Bastion and Marisol's relationship has affected the normal operations of the company." Marisol quickly sensed a change in the atmosphere of the office. When she walked into the office on Monday morning, her otherwise enthusiastic coworkers began to deliberately keep their distance. Those subordinates who used to treat her with respect are now just doing business. Some female coworkers looked at her with obvious contempt in their eyes, while the male coworkers' gazes became ambiguous. What embarrassed her even more was Bastion's attitude. At Monday's management meeting, he deliberately distanced himself from her, not even making eye contact. At lunchtime, when she tried to invite him to lunch as usual, Bastion's reaction sobered her completely. "Let bygones be bygones about the weekend," he whispered. "For the sake of the company's reputation and for the sake of our respective careers, it's best that we keep a professional distance." The words hit Marisol like a hard slap in the face. She then realizes that Bastion never took her seriously and that she was just an episode in his boring life. Meanwhile, rumors within the company began to fester. Some say she's a random woman, some say she's trying to use it to get to the top, and some have even begun to dredge up her past promotions, suggesting that her previous promotions weren't so bright either. The next week, she was called into human resources. The department head told her with a grimace, "We don't have a rule against office romances, but your behavior has affected the company's reputation and normal operations. If the situation continues to deteriorate, we will have to consider taking some measures against you." The conversation makes Marisol realize that not only has she gambled on her marriage, but even her hard-won career advancement is in jeopardy. But the irony of it all is that when she needs support the most, the man who made her desperate is hiding away. Upon returning home, Marisol tries to initiate a conversation with Thiago. "Shouldn't you at least ask me how my weekend went?" she said with mock relief. "Why should I know?" Thiago replied without looking up, "I'm guessing you made out with Bastion a couple times. Isn't that what cheating women do?" "We went out too, and ate at a couple nice restaurants," she whispered, but deliberately avoided the unpleasant details. "That's good. I'm really happy for you. Maybe one of your friends will be interested in you. Your husband is not interested in you at the moment." A week later, Attorney Garcia completed the first draft of the divorce complaint. The documents detail Marisol's infidelities, including an inappropriate relationship with Bastion, questionable financial expenditures, and all manner of evidence of breaking her marriage vows. All evidence was obtained through legal channels, including bank records, credit card statements, public company information, and official records from the Human Resources Department. "This document is very complete," Attorney Garcia said. "Although your wife's income is higher, her misconduct could seriously affect the outcome of the property division. Moreover, all of the evidence was obtained through proper means and would stand up perfectly in court." Thiago keeps the documents in a safe in his study. He knew that when Marisol received this document, she would have to face the full consequences of her actions. It's not revenge, it's a fair price. In the dead of night, he heard Marisol's suppressed cries coming from the guest room. The experience of that weekend had changed her life forever. Her husband's trust was irretrievable, her career was in crisis, and even the man who had made her willing to take risks had abandoned her. At this point, Marisol finally realizes that she has lost not only a loving husband, but also her dignity. And all because of mere impulse and thrill-seeking. As moonlight poured through the window into the room, Thiago lay in bed, thinking back over the marriage. He knew he had made the right choice, because there are some boundaries that once crossed, there is no turning back. Tomorrow, when the first rays of sunlight enter the room, a new life will begin. This is not the end, but a new beginning. The divorce proceedings lasted 3 months. During this time, Marisol's life spiraled completely out of control. She truly realized how well prepared Thiago was when she was served with divorce papers. All of the evidence was clearly presented to her. The inappropriate relationship with Bastion, the questionable financial expenditures, the breach of the marriage vows, each of which was supported by solid evidence. All of this evidence was obtained through legal means, her attorney said with a grimace. Bank records, credit card statements, official company documents, and even HR violations. It's hard for us to fight it. The best option is to seek a settlement. While waiting for the divorce to be finalized, Marisol's situation at the company took a sharp turn for the worse. That weekend's adventure spread through the office like a plague. Female co-workers who had once befriended her began to deliberately alienate her, and pantry whispers abruptly broke off as she passed, then erupted into meaningful laughter as she left. To add to her embarrassment, there was a subtle change in the attitudes of some of her male co-workers. The way they looked at her became revealing, the words suggestive. David, the marketing manager, even had the audacity to say in the elevator, "Hey, since you're willing to give people weekend passes, how about you consider giving me one too?" Such words poked at her heart like knives, but she could only hold back the shame and pretend she hadn't heard them. Bastion's change stung her even more. After that disappointing weekend, not only did he deliberately avoid her at work, he even began to openly oppose her proposals in management meetings. Even for routine departmental meetings, he always arranges for his assistant to attend on his behalf. Finally, one day, she blocked Bastion in the parking lot. "We need to talk," she said. Bastion looked around to make sure no one had noticed them, then said coldly, "It was just a weekend mistake, Marisol. We're all adults. Let's not take it too seriously." And he paused for a moment and gave a sarcastic smile that, to be honest, the experience that weekend wasn't as good as I expected. Those words completely shattered the last of Marisol's pride. That afternoon, she was approached by Human Resources. This is the third conversation in a month. The company has received several complaints of workplace harassment recently, the HR director said bluntly, adding that given the current situation, we think you need a new environment. The North Carolina division has just the right need for an experienced executive. It's a win-win. The implication is clear. Either accept the reassignment or face more serious consequences. Just the day before Marisol is set to leave, her assistant Elena whispers her a message. "Did you know that Bastion's request to be transferred back to the Amsterdam headquarters has been granted?" It was said that he had similar rumors in Holland, and that this visit to the US was supposed to be a punishment in disguise. The news hit Marisol like a punch in the gut. She then realizes that she was just a pastime during Bastion's escape from punishment. The feelings for which she had given everything were so cheap in the eyes of the other. After moving to North Carolina, Marisol's life changed forever. The new work environment was not friendly, and her co-workers seemed to have heard her story. She began to keep to herself, locking herself in her apartment after work. Whenever it was late at night, she would stand on the balcony and stare at the lights in the distance. All are reminders of the mistakes she's made. The empty apartment, the cold social circle, the loneliness of being far from home. She began to realize that this punishment might just be beginning. This is the price of betrayal. Not only do you lose a loving husband, but you also hitch a ride on hard-won career advancement and social circles. The most painful part is that when she finally realizes this, the world is not going to give her a do-over. 2 years after his divorce, Thiago moved away from the memory-filled urban area and bought a small condo in the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona. He needs time and space to heal the wounds inside. For the first 6 months, he threw himself completely into his work and spent his weekends hiking alone or reading at home. Over time, he began receiving counseling and learning to make peace with his past. Meanwhile, far away in North Carolina, Marisol is adjusting to her new life. Through her church activities, she worked to integrate into the local community and tried to rebuild her social circle. But deep down, the guilt and sense of loss lingered. Every Saturday morning, Thiago shops at Valley View Supermarket, not far from his home. He has developed a regular shopping route, starting in the fresh food section, then the bakery section, and finally the fast food section. This simple habit reassured him. It was here that he first noticed the schoolteacher who always shopped alone. He saw the way she carefully selected the fruits, comparing prices carefully in front of the shelves. Though he never initiated conversation, he began to take to quietly observing the seemingly gentle and introspective woman as he shopped. Luciana is a 5th-grade teacher at St. Mary's Elementary School in Phoenix. As the second generation of a Mexican-American immigrant family, she inherited her mother's gentle demeanor. The 29-year-old had soft dark brown wavy hair, bright brown eyes, and a fair complexion. While not stunningly beautiful, there was a purity and sincerity in her eyes. After noticing the handsome man for 5 whole months, Luciana finally works up the courage to strike up a conversation. "I know this may be a bit presumptuous," she said with a hint of nervousness in her voice. "I'm Luciana. Would you like to join me for a cup of coffee?" Thiago was impressed by her courage. It was the first time he'd had a crush on a woman in his 2 years of divorce. Their dates started at a coffee shop and slowly progressed to hiking together and participating in school volunteer activities. Luciana's life is simple, but full of warmth. She would prepare small handmade gifts for her students, visit her parents who lived in the suburbs on weekends, and occasionally help out at the Mexican restaurant run by her family. Just as Thiago and Luciana's relationship is heating up, Marisol meets entrepreneur Fernando at church. The man, who was 10 years older than her, gave her a sense of security, and the two quickly settled into a relationship. Thiago and Luciana's relationship lasted a year. During this year, he completely healed the wounds of his past. Luciana never pries into his past, but is always there to give him the warmest support when he needs it. When they decided to get married, everything seemed to fall into place. The wedding was simple and cozy at St. Mary's Church. Luciana's students scattered flower petals to bless their beloved teachers. This time, she finally went from bridesmaid to bride. 2 years later, they welcomed their first child, Rodrigo. When Thiago held his son for the first time, his heart was filled with a happiness he had never felt before. Marisol, at this time, was also married to Fernando, but she chose to accept her husband's decision not to have children and to focus on her career development. After 2 more years, Thiago and Luciana's daughter, Carmen, was born to complete the family. Luciana is a naturally good mother who perfectly translates her love and patience for her students. Even while raising 2 children, she continued to teach because she believed in the value of education. And in North Carolina, Marisol's marriage began to crack. Fernando's job has him traveling a lot, and the two of them are together a lot. Eventually, she discovers that her husband is having an affair with his young secretary, which reminds her of the mistakes she has made. This time, she chose to simply end the marriage. Time flew by and Thiago held Luciana's hand tightly as Carmen stood at the high school podium to give her graduation speech. Sitting in the audience, they watched their 18-year-old daughter confidently share her coming-of-age story. 15-year-old Rodrigo feigned embarrassment at his parents' intimacy, but pride in the family showed in his eyes. "Oh, come on, you two. Not here. Stop it," Rodrigo grumbled, but with a smile on his lips. Thiago and Luciana looked at each other and exchanged knowing glances. After 18 years of marriage, their love has not only not faded, but has grown deeper because of their shared experiences. This is life's fairest arrangement. When a person chooses to betray, he or she is destined to lose the qualification of having true love. And when a person always remains sincere, he or she will surely be able to wait for the gift of fate. Thiago's story of rebirth tells us that true happiness is often hidden in the mundane everyday, not in illusory pomp and circumstance. Thank you for listening to this story of emotional ups and downs. We would love to know where in the world you are watching this video right now. What time is it? Let us know in the comments section. Whether it's good morning, good afternoon, or good night, I wish you a wonderful day. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to our channel for more great content. I look forward to seeing you again in another story.